Hey everyone, this is Ryder from Skip, and I have a quick important video on the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act that was just signed into law a few hours ago. This is really good news if you took the PPP loan or if you're still considering taking some PPP money because money is still available. So please watch this short video to the end because I'm going to go over the 4 things you should know about the PPPFA, as it's shortened to, and what was in the law today that you should know. And specifically, these things will affect your hiring decisions and your spending decisions. So anyway, this is good news. Thanks again for your support and subscribing. And feel free to share this with other small business owners because, again, there's been so much apprehension over the past 2 months about how am I going to get this forgiven? How do I rehire people in time? What if they don't want to come back? So this answers all of that. So let's dive in. First, I want to point out that this was signed into law today and it passed fairly quickly. It became apparent in the beginning of May when lockdowns were still happening that, hey, the original intent of the PPP, which was part of the first 2 to 3 trillion stimulus bill. I think that was the CARES Act, right? That was back in April. Seems like forever ago. The original intent was businesses would get the money, they'd have 8 weeks to spend it, and we would be reopened because we would somehow have coronavirus under control. Turns out that isn't the case by far. Many businesses are still closed, or if your state has reopened, you are very likely at a fraction of the business you were at pre-COVID, and maybe you're seeing some improvements. So the bottom line is, middle of May, lawmakers talked about this Flexibility Act, and they passed it fairly quickly, signed into law today. So the first and most important thing, which I hope everyone understands, is that the forgiveness period has been extended, okay? This is really important. Many people, whether you received money in the first PPP tranche, which was about April 3rd to April 15th, was when that first pot of money was used up, you would have received the money quickly. And then from that date when you received it, let's say beginning or mid of April, you were told you had 8 weeks to spend it, okay? So if you got the money then, you have been under the impression this whole time that you needed to spend it by next week, middle of June. So for some of you, it might be too late. You were already rehiring and spending because you had the old rules. These are the new rules. Now you have 16 additional weeks to spend it. So 24 weeks in total. So whether you got your money mid-April, you have basically 6 months to spend it. And if you got it mid-May, or if you're still going to apply, again, there is still money in the pot for PPP loans, and there are lenders that are still giving it out. I'll leave a link to a couple of them in the description. So now you don't need to stress about just throwing out the money because you want to get it forgiven. So that's really good news, and I hope for some of you it's not too late. Basically hold on to the money and spend it thoughtfully, let's say. Okay, second is to get forgiveness, now less money needs to go towards payroll. So before there was the 75%, 25% rule. 75% had to go towards payroll, 25% could go towards other. Other, in this case, is rent, mortgage, payments, or utilities. So that's been changed. Many business owners were asking for a 50-50 split because you may have low employee costs, but you have some of your highest costs could be the rent. So many of you are wondering, well, gosh, I really don't need to pay myself. I just want to be able to pay rent, so I don't have to, get in trouble with my, with my renter. So this is good news. So that basically means 60% if you want, or rather 40% if you want, can go towards other things. You could still spend 100% on payroll. So it's just between 100 and 60% has to be spent on payroll. So that's good news, gives you more flexibility. Again, this is the PPP Flexibility Act. So you notice all of these provide flexibility. The third here is to rehire workers, you now have an additional 6 months. So previously, again, you were required to rehire by June 30th. This was in the original CARES Act, even if you were still closed. So that was the tricky part. Now you have until December 31st, 2020. So let's say you get a PPP loan in 2 weeks, right? Or let's say July 1st. So from July 1st to December 31st, that's more or less the 6-month period, or a little less than 24 weeks. But that means that if you were open then and you took PPP money, you could then rehire people, but you have time. You don't have to bring them back right away. You can ramp up as you wish, with the intent obviously being, hey, if you had 10 employees pre-COVID, maybe by the end of the year, you're at the same volume. I think that's optimistic, but it depends on your industry. You may be at the same volume you were doing pre-COVID, and therefore you'd be able to bring back the 10 people. So that's good. But again, this is that's a very loose rule too, because as it turns out, the way I read this is the rehire requirements aren't really that strict anymore. They have been significantly relaxed. And we had reported in previous videos that, if you wrote a letter to a former employee and said, hey, we have a job for you, can you come back? And they said no, you would be off the hook. And in a lot of cases, people want to stay on unemployment, or they're thinking, hey, maybe it's better to stay on unemployment while there's the $600 per week boost. When that boost ends, of course, maybe the boost will be extended, but if that boost ends, end of July, maybe they'll want to go back to work. Anyway, now you do not have to rehire, even if you say, I'm going to wait until December 31st to make the decision, and even if you then realize you don't want to bring someone back, it doesn't make financial sense for you, you need to demonstrate that either you cannot hire a similarly qualified employee, or that your business activity is not at the same level it was at pre-coronavirus. So if you meet one of those, your loan will still be forgiven. So, and I haven't looked at any more documents. I think probably now that this is passed, the SBA may update, or they will update, the forgiveness documents, because the old forgiveness documents had the old rules. Now the new ones will specify how to document all of this. So as soon as those get published by the SBA, I'll share those. Hopefully they'll be straightforward, but I'll highlight if there's anything tricky or potentially confusing. But anyway, basically, you don't need to bring folks on, especially if you're struggling. And I imagine the vast majority, you will be at a different level than you're at pre-coronavirus. I mean, a lot of the experts say we're talking, again, depends on the industry, but for service industries, it's going to take a while. Several months, probably next year, we may be able to ramp up to business levels. But as consumers are still thinking about what to do, obviously they're still nervous and taking extreme precautions. And even if you are fully open and you have a restaurant, let's say, you may be at 50% capacity with new social distancing guidelines. So that's good too. What all of this means in summary is that you will likely have your loan forgiven, So it's not that difficult to do. To pay attention to these, of course, but basically most businesses should have their loan forgiven, and I think that's the SBA's intent. They obviously want to protect businesses and protect jobs, first and foremost. The last thing here, okay, even if you have to repay all or part of it, again, it's not a black or white repayment. Let's say 10% of your loan you used towards a non-qualified expense because you had to do it, like stuff for working remotely. Like, I can't think of any examples that would fall outside of the criteria, but there are some. So let's say you had to repay 10% of it or all of it. You now have 5 years to repay. So it previously was 2 years. This is great news. 5 years at 1%. That's still a great. That's essentially. It's not zero interest, but it's the lowest loan you'll ever get. So again, I hope this helps, and please share with other small business owners because we would love to have everyone feel calm about these new changes. Given so many other uncertainties and problems that they're facing, we don't want people to have to worry and stress about PPP forgiveness. Hope this helps, and please leave a comment if you have questions, if you've taken a PPP loan, or if you're thinking about it but you're still weighing pros and cons. We have a great community that may answer, and I'll help answer too. So anyway, please stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of yourselves.